Hi, I know it's been a really long time. I let a bathroom remodel get the better of me. And then I went to Korea for 10 days. And do you think that made me stop reading? No. So this results in me having to talk to you about 36 books. I wrote them all down. And so I think I'm just going to, in this video, talk about these, and then because there's so many Agatha Christie's, I will have a separate video about the Agatha Christie's that I read over the summer and how I feel about Agatha Christie in general. I tried to categorize them by litfic, and like nonfic, and then just by like writers that I binged. And obviously a huge writer binge here. So I think the biggest to address about this summer's readings is that I discovered the library again. I got a library card after not having one for many years, even though I grew up practically at the library as a child. And I discovered the advent of Libby. So a lot of the books that I consumed have been in the form of ebooks, physical library books that I don't have the physical copies of here with me, except for a few that I just loved and bought copies of. So with that, I'll start with the first book that I checked out, Shelter by Jung Yun. I read Oh Beautiful by Jung Yun earlier this year in January. I did not like it. I didn't like the story. I didn't like the voice. I found the story to actually be a little egregious, actually. And so why did I give her another chance? I guess she played the Korean card on me, the Korean American card on me. And also while I was just browsing the library, I found her first book, Shelter, which I've heard people say that they may have liked better than Oh Beautiful, which is her second novel. So I was like, let's just give her another shot. You know, I'm glad I did, because it confirmed my initial opinion of her in that, for whatever reason, Jung Yun's voice, I'm sorry to say, is very defensive, judgmental, manipulative. Both novels main characters feature very unlikable characters who believe that they're entitled to much more empathy than they're doled. And in this one, in Shelter, there are some trauma scenes that I feel very manipulative. This is kind of a scary book, a lot of trauma, just checked all the boxes of trauma warnings, which I don't know, for some people that is never okay. And personally, I feel like if there's a point to it, there's, it's a setup and then it pays off at the end, I guess, thank you for this journey. Except that the payoff that I feel Jung Yun is making is highlighting the haplessness of her characters. Like, she's manipulating her readers to feel bad for these POC characters who don't deserve all this crap that has happened to them. I mean, really, I believe that nobody deserves crappy lives, but it's just that micromanaging in the writing that I'm like, stop, that I had a hard time with. So if and when this writer comes out with a third novel, I'm gonna feel very at ease to just saying no. I'm sorry. I will say that even though I really, really dislike Jung Yun's writing, I do have to appreciate the quality of writing. I despise the story, I despise the characters, I despise the intent, and yet Jung Yun still manages to captivate. You know the saying how the opposite of loving something isn't hating something, it's being indifferent to it? I hate Jung Yun's writing, I'm not indifferent to it. And then we read Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, which I feel like some people could make the argument that this is also a bit of trauma porn, sad porn, depression porn. This is the definition of social anxiety, #awkward. But my God, did this check off all of the boxes of everything that I love in a novel. Her name is Martha. It is hilarious. She is depressed. We're talking suburbanites in the UK. Speaking in emojis. There's pop culture. There's boobs. There's motherhood. We're drinking Negronis. We're talking sad, sad Christmases like the song River by Joni Mitchell. So while the story is about a depressed woman, the book as a whole does not feel depressing because there is an incredible supporting cast of family members, cousins who lift this entire story up into almost a heartwarming, feel-good Christmas story. This book feels like a very good mother. It's probably Meg Mason. She knows when to support and when to push. I used an ungodly amount of Kleenex for all of my snot and tears. This was a library book that I just loved so much that I bought a physical copy of. Can't wait to reread this, maybe over Christmas, maybe next Christmas. I highly recommend. One of my favorites for this year. And then I read Lapvona by Ottessa Moshfegh because I had a stack of books, including War and Peace. I think this is the book that I started War and Peace, as you saw in my vlog, in September when I was in Korea. But in actuality, I started War and Peace back in July. And then I get a notification saying that my ebook for Lapvona came in early and I have like 1 week to read it. Okay, this was Ottessa Moshfegh's lockdown baby. I love reading what writers wrote during lockdown, seeing what they devoted their time to, what they were thinking during that time. In Ottessa Moshfegh's case, oh, it was dark. It was, we were not in a good place. She was not in a good place. We are not in a good place. She is angry. She is infuriated. We're seeing red, Scorsese red. We are calling people stupid, which is probably why there were so many negative reviews for this book. Like, I could feel people bristling at this. But that's what art should be doing. Like, looking at life and reflecting it back to us, questioning shit. And regarding that, I just feel like your response to that says more about you than about the situation. And yeah, this was very gory. The morning that I started reading Lapvona, while walking my kid to school with my husband saw a dead rabbit on the street. And the way that he told me was, oh, a rabbit got run over. So I turned around and looked, and there was a fresh carcass. The leg was ripped off. Part of it was skinned. I saw the pinkness of its flesh, big black eyes filled with shock and terror, its entrails spilling out from its tawny fur. Just every detail about this carcass highly tuned during the nanosecond that I looked at it. I couldn't believe that his reaction was so simple, while I was like horrified. This book is kind of like that. Ottessa Moshfegh was like my husband saying, oh look, it's a dead rabbit. It's a dead bunny on the street. And I look and I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. So, you know, we are me. Like, that's most people's reactions to the content of this book, of this story. Lapvona is Moshfegh's fiery response to those who aid either wittingly or unwittingly in the stark economic divide that we're living in currently of this unrestrained capitalism. She's not afraid to say that the villagers are stupid and dumb for being in their situation unquestioningly. Like, she is fucking angry. No more bullshit. This is also the plottiest of Ottessa Moshfegh books. I think it kind of has to be because it's got a very fable-esque quality to it where, you know, you can almost feel her. I mean, not that, you know, we write this, maybe like furiously typing very loudly. Like, I am writing this story, but you can clearly tell what I mean. Like, she can't anymore. She's too infuriated for mystic ponderings, for any like too thinky, blink and you miss it allegories. Like, she has to point fingers ASAP. And overall, I just felt like it was really fun to see all of the different characters' ideas of like their worldview, their tolerance for goodness. My favorite detail is Lisbeth's 1 cabbage leaf only diet, because that is her claim to divinity. Props to her dedication. Likewise with Merrick's more pain, more gain mentality of more pain that he suffers, that's his way towards closeness to God. Overall, I liked it. I think of all the Moshfeghs, Eileen is still my favorite. Lapvona was pretty good. I found it fun. Of course, I, whizzed through it in a couple of days. It's great. And all of the conversation around it was, I don't know. I stopped watching the news for a reason, and then I was watching the conversation around this book, and I was like, no, off. It's the same. We're all fucked. I also read O William by Elizabeth Strout on Libby as an ebook, and I obviously liked it enough to purchase a paperback. This is my first Elizabeth Strout. I'm obviously impressed. Is she the Anglo-Saxon Elena Ferrante? And this is apparently like the second of a trilogy that I just kind of dived in blind after watching Kieran talk about this book. So while the title of this is O William, the main character is this woman in her 60s named Lucy Barton. So the first title of this trilogy is called My Name is Lucy Barton. And this book I started while I was fighting with my husband, which was very appropriate, it felt, because Lucy Barton and William are a divorced couple who have children together and have since developed a very amicable relationship where they still have regular phone calls, catching up in each other's lives, spending holidays and trips together with each other's families. And though they're divorced and she doesn't want to be married to him anymore, she still obviously loves her ex-husband very much. So I was very impressed by this very complex but natural, dare I even say, I don't think it doesn't feel uncommon. I was very moved by their relationship. Wondered if I ever split up with my husband, if we would have this kind of relationship, because it is based on love. And just because you get divorced from someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will stop caring for each other. But what really kept me stimulated by this was the elusive writing. It was like hazy within depths of memory, kind of like Nancy Lehman or like a reflective female writer doing a multi-generational story like Pachinko, just slimmer and more ephemeral. And I say Pachinko because it's about Lucy Barton, who has escaped from poverty, a very Korean topic. It deals a lot with her ex-mother-in-law, another very Korean topic. There are just a lot of examples showing how women think about certain things, like she took a World War II class at the New School to better understand her father, who fought in the war. I have never fully understood the whole class business in America because I came from the very bottom of it, and when that happens, it never really leaves you. I had the strangest sensation of both being invisible and yet having a spotlight on my head that said, "This young woman knows nothing." There was something about her that seemed deeply, almost fundamentally, comfortable inside herself, the way I think a person is when they have been loved by their parents. How is it that some people know how to do this, and others, like me, still give off the faint smell of what we came from? Yeah, I'm really intrigued by Elizabeth Strout. And next I read, via library audiobook, We Are Never Meeting in Real Life, essays by Samantha Irby, because I heard from Claire Reads Books, that her audiobooks are really great because she reads them herself. And she is funny on the page, she is funny in the ears. While I was listening to the audiobook, I was like, why don't I own this already? Just order it. I already have all of the other paperbacks. Let's just add it to the collection. She reminds me of Melissa Broder. They're both funny and heartbreaking at the same time, like hopeless romantics. Her desires and her heartbreaks speak to our contemporary dating culture. I can't afford therapy, but I can buy a sandwich. I love her. I want to hang out with her forever. She's just too relatable. So every July, I used to read Lolita because what I feel about that book is basically how society, the patriarchy, views women, how they sexualize women, and basically how that's not okay. So last July, in lieu of Lolita, I read Consent by Vanessa Springora. And then this July, I happened to read My Body by Emily Ratajkowski from the library as an audiobook, which she reads herself. And I happened to read it right after her split up from her cheating husband. So yes, is she a stellar writer? No. Does she have a monotone vocal fry? Yeah. She doesn't exactly read very well. She isn't the pioneering champion of feminist thinkers. However, this is a primary source of a woman under constant systemic patriarchal subjugation, where her own mind becomes imprisoned to its rules. You know, she's not the bravest, she's not the smartest, but that doesn't invalidate her message of what it's like living under constant objectification from everyone, society, her own mother, herself, her guilt over capitalism, her own role within the system, her complex over money, and she always feels the need to pay so that she doesn't owe anyone, like men. So this is a great July/Lolita substitute read for me. Like, basically, summer shouldn't mean bikini bods. It should mean, why the hell do we feel the need for bikini bods? Like, think about that. I really liked my body. I'm considering getting the paperback. I mean, I will get the paperback if I happen to find it at a thrift shop. Speaking of celebrity memoirs, I also read Hello Molly by Molly Shannon as a library ebook. This is your classic Gen X memoir with a bad childhood, rough jobs, #MeToos, celebrity tales, SNL behind the scenes, parental deaths. It's actually a shockingly jaw-dropping car crash prologue. Her writing is very simple and direct, very explanatory, but the sheer strength of her personality really carried through a very strong story. And it's always very fantastical hearing like super Gen X-y stories of Gen X-y, baby boomer, of like kids hijinks, youthful hijinks, where she and her sister, or like a friend, hopped a plane. I mean, it's actually literally hopping up on a plane to New York City, where like two kids just hung out in the city and then caught one back home. Like, can you imagine doing that now? Like, no, that's impossible post 9/11. How things have changed. And the biggest takeaways from her memoir is to trust yourself. And while that looks very different now than it did for her generation, I feel like you could still make that argument today that sometimes bad childhoods can be gold. Like, as Nora Ephron says, everything is copy. Like, complicated relationships with your parents aren't so bad. And she kind of talks about, though times are different, where you can no longer walk into an office and demand/get a job, kind of gives you a good roadmap for how to carry yourself as if you're a poor kid among rich kids, like how to carry confidence, even though you weren't given it from birth. I also kind of thought of Stanley Tucci's Taste from last year, where this was semi-boring, but still way better than Taste. Continuing on with the celebrity nonfiction, I love Joni Mitchell, huge fan. She performed at the Newport Folk Festival in June with Brandi Carlile on a stage full of people, like friends in her community. And she sounded so good after decades of illness and not performing. Morning Glory on the Vine is a hand-drawn book that she made as like gift to give her friends and family members for like Christmas one year, which ended up getting published. God, did you know that she drew every single one of her album covers? She is an artist through and through, such an inspiration. Her drawings are so tender and so colorful. Reading these handwritten lyrics made it feel that much more special. This is a beautiful book. Speaking of poetry, and I would argue she is a celebrity of her own right, I read Mary Oliver's New and Selected Poems, Volume 2. When I was making my Happy Birthday Charlie tag video, there was a question about like, what was your favorite thrift find, like secondhand book find? I remembered this, where I went to Manhattan in 2019 and walked into every single used bookstore that I found, and there are many in Manhattan, in New York in general, with like the specific aim to find any Mary Oliver. And like, shockingly, I mean, I guess not, like good on you, New York City, in 2019, in September 2019, because this was literally the only Mary Oliver that I found at Codex Books I love that store. It's beautiful. Like, what can you say about Mary Oliver other than that? Other than it's so cozy, it's so beautiful, goes straight to your heart. I've been in this world just long enough to learn, not always easily, to love my neighbors and to allow them every possibility. You are breathing patiently. It is a beautiful sound. It is your life, which is so close to my own that I would not know where to drop the knife of separation. I'm continuing along my reading through E.M. Forster with Maurice. I will say that I liked it, I didn't love it. Maurice is a Hufflepuff who has his path laid out before him, but in due time realizes that that's not his way. And it takes courage to veer off that path and forge his own that feels right to him, whatever that may be. Like, he's a work in progress, whatever the consequences may be. I mean, because the story is set in, like, is it Oxford? You know, like a very certain set of British upper class men. We can't get away from the feeling of like priggishness, of being straitjacketed. There's so much uneasiness, there's so much insecurity. So while I do appreciate the story, I can't like wholeheartedly love it, because I mean, with every emphaticness, fuck Clive. They looked at one another for a moment before beginning new lives. What an ending, he sobbed. What an ending. I read Wendell Berry's Hannah Coulter, finally. I've been wanting to read it since I read his Why I'm Not Going to Buy a Computer earlier this year. And I really liked his prose and was interested in reading his novels, particularly Hannah Coulter, because I think it's his most well-regarded one. And you know, I really enjoyed it. I realized that he is a crotchety, old, like libertarian, hyper liberal, white mansplainy man. He's like the guy that, you know, talks about climate change and how our society and the world in general is just going downhill, and you're like, and then he starts talking about conservative ideals are not the way forward, we have to be more progressive, and you're like, and then he starts being all, and you know, we should get rid of banks and money and live completely in nature and probably set up a bartering system, and you're like, oh, you lost me. And let's just say that his moral rectitude is stiff, but his writing is quite beautiful. The story was great. It was one of those books that feels older and more mature than you. Grief is not a force and has no power to hold. You only bear it. Love is what carries you, for it is always there, even in the dark. Love in this world doesn't come out of thin air. It is not something thought up. Like ourselves, it grows out of the ground. It has a body and a place. There was innumerable mentions of work in this book. Did I cry at the end? Yes, I'm still a human being. I'm not a cold-hearted robot. This is a book where if I, you know, was like a white American person, I would read aloud to my ailing invalid grandparent, thinking, hey, I thought of you, Grandma, while I was reading this book. I hope you like it too. And spend time with my grandparent that way, reading this book together and talking and having conversations. Oh crap, I'm losing the light. I read 2 books by Leesa Cross-Smith after hearing Ketevan rave about this writer. I read Whiskey and Ribbons and This Close to Okay. I read Whiskey and Ribbons first, right after reading We Are Never Meeting in Real Life by Samantha Irby. And if Samantha Irby was like speaking to the hopelessly romantic, forever between relationships, struggling with her weight and looks main character, Whiskey and Ribbons is like the opposite of that, like the antithesis, where it may be Samantha Irby's ideal. Like, we've got a petite little light-skinned ballerina with like little tufts of armpit hair that's so cute it even gets its own nickname. Characters who genuinely, sincerely use the word fornicate in their vernacular. This is very obviously Christian, spiritual, very traditional gender roles. It was super enjoyable to read, like easy to read. I was hearing neo soul in the background, even though like in the book it mentions a lot of actual songs. To me, I was thinking of the people that I met at the foreign exchange concerts. There's smoothness in the yearning desire, and the writing is really strong. Leesa Cross-Smith has this wonderful way of immediately drawing you in to these beautiful human characters and the way that they love each other. I loved all the quirks and little details that place all of her stories in the state of Kentucky, in like a Black community. Both these books feature hot men who insist on cooking and immediately doing the dishes after, completely putting them away, which invariably leads to thoughts of hot sex after. I would say that these books are like pumpkin spice lattes of a book. Like, they're really cozy, but they satisfy a particular desire. Did I mention that they're technically romance? I mean, I'm captivated. Also, from hearing through Caravan, I read 2 books from Joshua Whitehead. I read Johnny Appleseed and Love After the End, an anthology of Two-Spirit and indigiqueer speculative fiction. I borrowed physical copies from the library, went into them blind, learned what indigiqueer means, my first time hearing the terms Two-Spirit, my first time reading Indigenous writers. Overall, I feel like I got about 65%. And was just like completely awashed in feelings of paranoia, dread, hopelessness, rootlessness, powerlessness, evil of mankind. I read them during the Salman Rushdie horror, like We Deserve to Burn. Love After the End in particular felt apocalyptic, almost sci-fi. If your whole world gets decimated by another, it'd feel pretty trippy to you too. I mean, climate change is coming for us all. And overall, I just felt really terrible. Like, so much sorrow about how there's swaths of people who feel like they're living in this apocalyptic dystopia, while others like me feel great. It also felt like living through the 2020s, This Is Fine era, but without first world people problems who use this meme. And in Love After the End, there's this wonderful ending with each writer's little bio blurb. And it felt like Joshua Whitehead, as the editor of this short story compilation, was introducing us to new friends. And Johnny Appleseed, while I can never relate to his level of horniness, truly, among many others, a problem. Like alcoholism, they're all a band-aid for deeper pains of losing who they are as a person, as a community. Not just like, oh, crappy me, crappy my life. Like, if everyone around you who look like you, who's in your community, are living the same quality of life, are facing the same destiny, that's really tough to bear. I couldn't not think of the film Paris is Burning. Not just because Johnny likes to vogue at house party powwows, but it really felt like an intimate, insightful portrayal of a world that I don't know about. I mean, despite feeling like shit the whole time, I really enjoyed both of these books. I read The Rose of Versailles Omnibus 1 and Claudine. I own Claudine for whatever reason, and I borrowed The Rose of Versailles from the library. The Rose of Versailles is very well known. Both of these are from the 70s, but The Rose of Versailles is very well known. This drawing style is so nostalgic. It's very rounded, very ornate. And I'm sure at the time, during the 70s, these were very pertinent. Like, it spoke to this generation, but like reading them both now, they are so corny, just silly, problematic, old-fashioned. I thought of like SNL, the 70s SNL with like Bill Murray and, you know, all of those really famous people from when SNL first started, that a lot of people love the original cast. But when I watch clips from, you know, the original cast SNL, I never laugh. I don't find any of them funny. But I watch people from like my era of SNL, like John Mulaney, and I find them hilarious and brilliant. But like the people who love the 70s SNL don't find Mulaney funny at all. So it's the same here with the 70s social politics and feminism of the time with our current intersectional feminism. We've come way beyond this, and it's still interesting, and I appreciate this take from this very influential 70s Japanese mangaka, Ryoko Ikeda. And this is why I try to film as much as possible in daylight, because now we are in nighttime. But I read the Ardoris series by Charles Heathcote, and let me tell you, this was like, I mean, I felt like an anthropologist of northern British culture. So much Googling involved reading these books. So I can tell you, a vegetable marrow is like zucchini. Insoles are like Converse shoes. Silvacrin is a hairspray brand. Milk teeth are baby teeth. Secateurs are pruning shears. Poke lily is a vegetable mustard chutney. Sat nav is GPS. A flu jab is a flu shot. He uses the term damage limitation. Unlike me could say mitigating stress. But basically the story of Ardoris follows this septuagenarian, upper middle class white lady named Mrs. Doris Copeland, who lives in Partridge Mews. She is like a Lucy Ricardo meets The Godfather, Don Corleone. And over her entire life, Doris has made many friends, many enemies. And our Doris gets into many shenanigans with her Women's Institute, with her neighbors, with people in her community of Partridge Mews on Shakespeare Avenue, from decades of beefing that one can only beef over time. I saw a lot of myself in Doris, where, you know, I live in Southern California. I live in Beigeville. I live in a suburb. I am in the upper middle class demographic. And though our Doris can be an insidious conservative Karen at times, the key difference is that she deeply, deeply cares. She truly loves her community, her family, her husband, even though she spends her entire life ordering him around and making him do things for her that he doesn't want to do. I mean, we've all been there. Even though she makes mistakes, she has the wherewithal and the fortitude and the forthright to correct them and admit her wrongs. And so all summer long, I have just really enjoyed my time spent with our Doris, with our Charles Heathcote, the writer. This was so smart. There's just constant quips, so many jokes, so much wordplay, and it was so cozy. So many references of things like fads, whether it's from the past couple of years, the past several decades, to the past century. So even though this was written in English, which is a language that I speak, it seemed so foreign to me, which was a delight. I felt like an anthropologist or like a Miss Marple, glimpsing into their lives that feels so familiar to my own. Although hopefully I will never get into this much trouble with my neighbors in my community. Oh my god, that would be my worst nightmare. Coulter is what a Korean person might say. We did it. We just talked about 21 books, bitches. And I didn't even get to the 15 Agatha Christie's that I read, all completely through audiobook. Most of them read by Hugh Fraser, whose voice is like butter, like so comforting. So I'm gonna have to get to that in a separate video because it's currently nighttime. I have my family coming home any minute now. This was so much fun talking about books again. I really should do it more often. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you all had a great summer of reading, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.